I did.
All right, calling the meeting to order at 7:02. Has there been a declaration of public notice?
There has.
All right, order of business. Any public appearances?
We have, yeah, order of business, we have something. So
Okay.
I would like to recommend that we move item J6 to the beginning of the possible action items, J1. We got representatives from McKinstry here. They'll be presented as part of that agenda item. So I'd like to move that up to the beginning.
All right, any public appearances? No. All right, can I have a motion for the consent agenda?
I would move approval of the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay. Roll call vote. Susan?
Oh, aye.
Aye.
I thought it was
Aye.
done.
Aye. Lori, aye. Ayes have it, motion is carried. All right, next is recognition.
Okay. All right, congratulations to Mackenzie Babcock, a sophomore at MGHS, who was named Runner of the Year after her successful cross-country season. This season, she won 3 invitations and placed 4th overall at the WIAA Division I state meet. And there's a link with more information about her season achievements. Great job to the MG Show Choir as they hosted a preview show in the auditorium and invited some neighboring show choirs to join. And there is a recording of the show available, linked as well, and it was being recorded, of course, by our Monona Community Media's YouTube channel. We would like to recognize the Monona Grove High School Black Student Union for their volunteer work to prepare nearly 300 box meals for those in need, and to the Glacial Drumlin Student Council, who gathered over 1,000 non-perishable items to be donated to the River Food Pantry. And it's great to see our students serving their community. And high school students recently had the opportunity to meet with industry professionals in their interested fields. Some students attended an apprenticeship career fair, getting hands-on demos and learning about the opportunity to become an apprentice. Additionally, our anatomy and physiology students tested their equipment to take and interpret electrocardiograms with the Monona's fire chief, Jerry McMullen.
All right, great.
Dan, could I just add, there's also a really fabulous choir orchestra concert on December 8th that did the Requiem. And actually, I've never seen anything quite like that. Because, I mean, it featured the orchestra and the choir, and the whole stage was just filled. And so I was talking to Carl Davick afterwards, and he goes, "We've never done anything like this before." I mean, it was really incredible. So I just wanted to mention that event too.
Yeah.
'Cause that was really neat.
Thank you for sharing.
All right, correspondence and announcements.
Okay, we do have one announcement this evening. I'd like to announce that board member Andrew McKinney has resigned his position from the board effective December 7th. And so for board members, the procedures for replacing it, I've listed a proposed timeline and the policy that dictates how you fill vacancies. So we will have it on the agenda at the next meeting for you to decide and approve the meeting notice and the timeline and process for filling the vacant seat.
Thank you. All right, next are administrative reports. School safety report, James Blodgett.
Where did you want the J6?
On
You moved
the
it.
action items.
Okay,
Yeah, so we'll do our reports first and then
we'll do that, okay.
yeah.
Okay, thank you for having me. I'm Jim Blodgett. I'm the Director of Safety and Security for both Middleton Cross Plains Schools and Monona Grove Schools. I started my career in education 32 years ago as a math, science, and pre-engineering teacher at Eau Claire Monona, and became really interested in technology and computers and networking. And during that time, developed enough skills to become the network engineer about the turn of the century. In fact, I was one of those people who spent New Year's Eve 1999 in a network operations center waiting for things to fall over. which most of them do not. It was, turned out to be not a bad day. I spent about 13 years doing that, and 10 years ago, I was offered the position of Director of Technology at Middleton Cross Plains, which I accepted right away, and became involved in the safety program almost immediately because of the strong ties between technology and safety. When Act 143 became available, I became the lead for safety and security in Middleton, and we implemented a large grant, about between $600,000 and $700,000 worth of equipment and training during that time. So the last 4 years, I've led the training and implementation of physical security at Middleton. Luckily, I no longer have to do the technology side, and I can just focus on the safety and security. And so that's why we're here today. We've had a busy 6 months. Knowing that I'm here about every other day, usually at even days of the calendar, we've accomplished quite a bit. And so we'll be talking about the things that we've done so far, and then some of the things that are coming up for the spring. One of the first things we started with was a standard crisis response protocol. This is loosely, pretty strongly based on the protocol from I Love You Guys, so we've made some modifications to fit Monona Grove. When I came here and visited in January, one of the things I noticed was that everybody was very interested in safety and was doing things in their building to make their buildings very safe, but they were all talking about it differently. They all had different vocabulary, they had different protocols, they were not necessarily on the same page when we had conversations, and so that seemed to be something that we needed to address right away. And so we adopted this protocol. It's really based around how we would respond to crises in a school. And so a classroom hold is basically what it sounds like. We get all the students out of the hallways, get them into classrooms, instruction continues, and it helps us deal with a crisis that might be going on within our building. Frequently, that's a medical incident or a behavioral incident, and it's just much easier to respond to those if we don't have people in the hallway. Plus, it provides a level of privacy to the person who's in distress, and it makes things less awkward for both the staff and the person that's in distress. A building secure is the next level up. It means that there's something outside of our building that could be at risk to our students or staff. And so we want to make sure that none of our students or staff are outside, and we make sure that our perimeter is locked and that we're not taking visitors in and we're not letting people leave. Obviously, if there's a situation outside of a building that could be dangerous, we don't want people to be walking around outside our building. We haven't experienced this yet this year, but there are times when there'll be a law enforcement event or a medical emergency or some other type of EMS event where we want to make sure that our staff and students are safe. And so we'll pull them all into the building and set our perimeter. We frequently have inclement weather. Apparently tonight we're going to get some. But when we have really severe weather where it's not safe to be on the perimeter of our building, we go to a shelter. And our shelter basically means that we come into our tornado or weather shelter areas to protect our students and staff from anything that might happen to the outside of the building. Obviously, tornado comes to mind, but there are other events like hazardous release of materials that could also be concerning, and we would want to be in a space that we could really control well. Obviously, we practice evacuation a lot. Fire drill is a major portion of our safety protocol, mainly because fire is, even though we've do a really good job of controlling that, it's also a danger, and so we want to make sure that everybody knows how to get out of our buildings. We also have other situations like gas leaks or a possible hazardous release of material inside the building that would cause us to need to evacuate quickly. And there are times when sewer systems back up or other things that are unpleasant happen, and we want to get our kids away from that so that we can deal with the situation. Finally, there's lockdown, and a lockdown is in response to some sort of an active threat or something very dangerous going on inside the building. And so we have two options, and we'll talk about those a little bit deeper later on. But our main focus is either to lock our classrooms and barricade their doors or to escape the building entirely. And that's one of the things that we practiced this fall already. We started the year with trainings and then some tabletops. And a training is just what it sounds like. It's basically a transfer of knowledge. Usually we use a slide deck, we have a discussion, we talk about the things that we want to happen. A tabletop is more of a scenario. And so we have teams that we've built. Schools have a situation response team that's basically been assigned to help deal with crises within the building. We also have a district-wide situation response team that we're working on that will be used to augment the resources for schools to help them get through a crisis that's too large for them to handle by themselves. And so a tabletop is basically a discussion with that team and looking at it from the lens of how they may be responding depending on what their role is in responding to the crisis. So we started with training our school response teams on incident command system. The incident command system comes out of the National Incident Management System, developed about 22 years ago, when people realized that most of our emergency responders and law enforcement were all using different methods for responding to a crisis. And so incident command basically sets a hierarchical framework for how we deal with a crisis. And one side is command, the other side is operations and planning, along with logistics. And we've, I would say, simplified that because it's a fairly complex protocol. And obviously our police and our fire departments follow it pretty rigidly. That's basically the way they're structured. Schools tend to be structured more loosely and not have that rigid hierarchical system. And so we've kind of like softened the edges and made it a little more relatable for our staff. So this fall we started with a pretty easy problem, and after training them about incident command and how that works, we went through a fairly simple problem that they've solved in the past and applied the framework on top of it. And as a recovering math teacher, I like to take previous knowledge and then bring in new knowledge and use that previous knowledge to augment the new knowledge. Usually people laugh about recovering math teacher. That's okay. Maybe I just didn't deliver that right, I'm not sure. Okay. We also work with our student support team. They're our counselors, our social workers, our psychologists, to help them learn better ways to manage trauma and to help students recover from traumatic situations. Prepare 2 is the class that we went through this summer. It's basically a framework for triaging trauma and then intervening with appropriate methods at the different levels of trauma. That comes in handy because obviously when we have a traumatic event, we may need to, we may not be able to stay in the school that we're in. We may have to move to a different spot and reunify our students with their families in a different place. And so having that background helps us when we have to do something that's pretty difficult. The reunification process, especially with our largest schools, will be a major event. Luckily, we've been able to secure a location for that, and we have a signed memorandum of understanding last week, so that we have a space large enough that we can even reunify our high school families if we need to. Not that that'll be comfortable, but we'll have the space to do it. So what we're trying to do right now is kind of build this culture of learning and then practicing. And so that's something that we'll continue to work on as the year continues. We have some more tabletops and other trainings planned for later in the winter and going into the spring. Basically to help schools keep building their capacity to handle crises and not have it be so disruptive to their days. We are required to do a drill a month for our safety program. This is 118.07.4, if you're looking up the state statutes or keeping score at home. We have 2 fire drills prescribed, 2 shelter drills prescribed. We have to do an active threat drill by December 31st, and all of our schools will have accomplished that by the end of next week. And then we can augment the rest of the months with other types of drills. So Many of our schools practice hold right away because that's something that maybe that they don't use often, but they use enough that it's good that people know how to do it. Many schools have also practiced secure already to make sure that their students and staff know what a secure is and what we want them to do. A couple schools have already practiced a shelter too, because we had some fairly severe weather in October that could have been much worse, and it seems like a good time to practice if we're having tornadoes in October now. Not sure when that started, but it seems like it's happening. We want our drills to not only be learning experiences for our students and staff, but we want our situation response teams to also practice during that time. And so our recommendation in our protocol is to, before the drill happens, to bring that situation response team together, make sure that they're briefed on what their roles are going to be during the drill, and then at the end of the drill, come back and debrief about how things went and how they felt they were able to respond using their different positions. And so that's an important part of doing a drill. It is not just get outside for a fire drill and then come back in. It's really the whole learning that gets wrapped around that drill. And those are really good chances for us to really practice our protocols. Some of our drills can induce some pretty strong feelings, especially if you're in anxiety. And so we follow trauma-sensitive schools training, and we make sure that we do our drills in a way that's very sensitive to students that may have pre-existing traumatic experiences, so that we don't trigger those. Our goal is for all of our drills to be learning experiences, and so we try to make sure that we keep all the emotions and the really strong feelings out of that drill, because once you're scared, you're no longer learning. And so we want to make sure that we do our drills at walking pace, and we give our students plenty of time to acclimate to the process that they're doing. Plus, we like to prepare them ahead of time on what the drill is going to be. And again, our teachers talk to them afterwards about how the drill went and what they felt and some ways that they could help deal with those feelings. Obviously, we need to keep our buildings safe. That's our primary way that we make sure that our children and our staff are safe. And so each fall, we do a safety assessment with law enforcement. That's mandated by statute. That comes out of Act 143. So we have two terrific school resource officers, and they help us with those assessments. We also have to have a custodian or a member of facilities, and then the principal needs to also be part of that process. And so we go through each building. The checklist is not horrible. It's about 35 different things that we look at. And then things that come up as deficient, we make sure that we mitigate as soon as possible. We also do weekly and monthly and other yearly evaluations of our systems. Mostly that's done by facilities. They look at the playgrounds, they look at the buildings, the classrooms, the systems that are within those buildings, and of course they have scheduled maintenance for all of our large systems, because if we can maintain stuff, it's easier than fixing it when it's broke. And so they have an established calendar for all the different things that they need to be doing maintenance on. We also have large fire suppression systems, and those are maintained by a contract company to make sure that, because we don't have the expertise or the time to really go through all those systems, and so that company comes in and basically takes care of things. So if you come during the summer, you might see somebody walking around with a little smoker to check our smoke heads. There'll be people checking the fire panels and the fire extinguishers in places where we have large hoods that have fire suppression built into them, especially if we're cooking and there might be grease or grease fires. Those are all things that have to be checked on a yearly or semi-annual basis. This week, and actually starting last Friday, we implemented an anonymous reporting tool. Now, the district has used a form in the past for people, for staff and students to ask for help through an electronic means. The thing is that when we do it all by ourselves, it means that if something comes in the middle of the night, somebody might need to wake up to deal with it. And I can tell you that that's a hard thing to do. And so we had a pretty good conversation with the Office of School Safety that's run out of the Wisconsin DOJ. And they, a couple years ago, built a tool that they're calling Speak Up, Speak Out. It's basically a web system that is manned 24 hours a day, all year long, by a group of highly trained mental health professionals. They call themselves the Resource Center, and they're basically there all the time. So if a call or a text or a response to our app comes in the middle of the night, they have people there that can actually handle that situation. And if need be, if there's an imminent danger to the student or the person who's requested help, they can dispatch either from EMS or law enforcement directly from their resource center. So it takes a big lift off of our staff. It's also used for students to report, bullying or not feeling, well, feeling depressed, feeling that they might hurt themselves. Now, obviously, we would prefer that they speak to an adult, and we have adults in our buildings that are trained to deal with or help students get through those feelings. But those feelings don't always come up between the hours that we're in school, and so if they need help after school, on a weekend, during vacation, that's where Speak Up, Speak Out comes in. This summer, I also discovered that our maps were a bit of disarray, and so luckily Act 109 was passed by the state legislature, and it provides money for us to develop maps for all of our buildings. And so we applied for a grant, and we won slightly more than $28,000 to be able to develop maps for all of our buildings. We chose Crisis Response Group because they have a really strong base of experience doing this. They actually come from a group of special forces members that were retired, and they actually used this technology when they were fighting in Afghanistan and Iraq. And so they've adopted it now for use in the public sector, specifically for schools and businesses. The map basically encompasses all of the things in the building that would be necessary to respond to a crisis. So where all the shutoffs are, where all the access control is, where all the fire suppression is, all those things that people throughout the district have in their heads, we're going to put on one map so that we can not only share that with our emergency responders, but also share it within our group. Because one of the big things that you probably notice is that we have a fair amount of turnover within our staff, and maintaining institutional knowledge is difficult. This is a really great tool for maintaining institutional knowledge about our buildings. The other really nice thing is it's aligned to the national grid. So if somebody's using a GPS responder, I'm speaking of law enforcement or emergency responders, the grid that's placed on our map aligns to their GPS transponder. And so it gives a really robust communication tool and platform to everybody who's responding to a crisis to help us. I may have talked too fast. Sorry about that. I feel like maybe I switched into auctioneer mode at some point.
Well, I think it was a phenomenal presentation, and it's
Yeah.
really great what you've been doing in just 6 months, though. I have a question about the Speak Up, Speak Out program. So you indicated it's anonymous. So say a child is in crisis, what's the next steps?
So their tool is built so they can be interactive with the person who's asked for help. And so they can reach back out right through their tool to speak with that person, either chatting or through texting, and try to get them to give more information, right? Because obviously an IP address is going to take us a while to figure out where that child is, especially if they're on a phone and they're moving in a car or something. And so their goal is to get as much information as possible and give that person the opportunity to tell us exactly who they are and where they are.
And do they notify parents as well?
Right.
Thank you.
As quickly as possible, right? All of that type of information becomes complex to gather, and hopefully the person who's talking to them will provide that information.
Eric?
I have a couple questions. The first one is, did you say there was a law that says we have to provide the trainings, or is that just as part of the Wisconsin DPI and the federal government that?
I'm sorry,
they
we have to provide.
Is there a law that says we have to provide that active shooter trainings
There is, Act 143 requires.
in Wisconsin?
Yeah, in Wisconsin.
Okay, I wasn't sure. So my big question is the trauma that some of these trainings create, is that, what's the benefit of that compared to the benefit of going through the trainings and having them be effective in what they do? Because there's not really any research that shows they're effective, and most of these shootings that happen are completely random. So I mean, has there been any foresight to that as far as or any studies on that?
So I would say that a couple things. One, we work really hard to remove the trauma from our drills. And so we focus on the actions that will keep us safe and not focus on what the threat might be or real or imagined. And so we know that when we're in danger in our buildings, the best ways to make ourselves safe is to lock our classroom door and barricade it or escape the building. And so that's what we practice. We don't simulate an assailant in the building. We don't create a story around it. What we do is we practice the things that make us safe. And it's exactly the same way we practice fire drills or tornado drills or other types of holds and secures. That we're not focusing on what the threat is. We're focusing on what keeps us safe. So that's part of it. We also are using the National Association of School Psychologists best practices in doing those drills to make sure that we stay away from any type of action that would be overly traumatic.
Okay.
And then I would say that there's strong evidence that practicing responding to a crisis does result in better response. There have been several studies, especially in the mid-2000s, that were done, not specifically around active shooter, but around responding to a crisis, especially when you're not going to have the amount of time that like a law enforcement or a fire department or an EMS has to really train around that. That if we do the walkthroughs in a way that helps people learn exactly what we want them to do, that they do much better when the real crisis happens.
Okay.
I can provide you with a couple links. if
No,
you want.
I guess my main concern is because, my daughter's 9, and she's mentioned things like, when she's done the training that they said, the bad guy or someone would come and stuff like that,
I would say that we're going to revisit that next month.
okay. That's my main concern. If it's treated more like a fire drill, it's just very direct and specific of this is what we do when it's a code blue, or this is what we do when it's a code red. And it's important that we do this for our safety without going too much into active shooter's gonna come in and shoot the school. That's where the
100%
trauma
agree
comes
with
in,
you.
that I could see the trauma comes in, so. And I don't know how it's done exactly. I mean, my 9-year-old says a lot of things that aren't necessarily really.
Well, I would say that
so.
the tool that we use this fall is probably not the best tool, but I didn't have time to do everything at once.
Okay, but
And
you're
so
looking at it.
We have a committee set up and we'll be doing that. And actually, January 20th is our first meeting. That's the first slot where everybody's available to come for a couple hours.
Okay, good.
I'll
Thank
just
you.
add, in previous years, I'll be honest, that we probably didn't do a great job and did some of those types of things. And we're really, with Jim's leadership, really taking a look at and doing it as we discussed what we should be, so.
Okay.
But to be fair, we probably, in hindsight, could have done things better in the past.
Okay.
And I don't think that's unique to us, because I've gone through it in different districts, and that language was used with Alice and things
Sure,
like that.
I know we're
so,
all adapting, I
yeah.
just think that was the area where I think we'd be doing better in, because I first-hand experience of, what someone went through.
And I'll be honest, I think our elementary principals really appreciate that. They feel hopefully they feel that they have more of a voice. They know, right, how to deal with children of that age, and, where in the past, it was more, you're gonna do this, we definitely have to change our approach.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Susan?
Jim, I really appreciate you doing this. It's really helpful for us to have a feel about that, because it's the kind of thing that keeps you awake at night. So,
I would say it keeps all of us looking at it.
yes, I know, we're all there. What's the role of the local police staff in relation to the work? You use the SROs.
We use the SROs for some things, yep, and they're a good source of knowledge for us. They're also, they lend credibility to the work that we're doing. And I would say that the more that we can have them understand how our buildings work, and the more that we can understand how they want to respond to a crisis, makes things work much better for both sides, right? Our goal when the fire department shows up is to stay out of the way. So we need to know what they're going to do so that we're not in the way. And it's similar with law enforcement. We want to know how they're going to respond to a crisis in our buildings. It doesn't necessarily need to be an assailant. It could be any number of things. But having that two-way conversation is really important for us to be able to know what we should be doing to stay out of their way so that they can deal with the situation we've asked them to come to. In fact, this fall we had, and you probably know about this, the number of hoaxes and active threat hoaxes that were called into schools, not just nationwide, but also in Wisconsin. We met with our 2 police chiefs and talked through our protocol for communication so that hopefully when we respond, or when that happens to us, and we respond, it won't be so disruptive to our day as it has been in other places in the country.
So we know if there's an event of any kind, even a training, we know how they would, again, you look at Uvalde, and clearly the communication.
Yeah, I would
was
say that
perfect.
from my experience, Uvalde is a far outlier. That's not been my experience with any of the police forces that I've worked with. And obviously I come from Eau Claire, and so there's county and local police there. In Middleton, we have 4 different police agencies that we work with, and here we have 3. And so I don't know of any law enforcement agency that would responded the way the Uvalde police responded. I don't understand what
So
happened.
again, I was just looking for that integration between the work that you do and the work that they do, if it were necessary to have you all on site at one time.
Yeah, and I would say that we have some work to do to continue to build that relationship, and there are hopefully will be some time for some activities over the next 6 to 9 months that we can do with them to make our relationship, our communication stronger.
Thank you.
Peter?
Sort of to Eric's point, and Susan, you're right, Uvalde is a really, in a lot of ways, big outlier.
It is.
And it is important to remember that the real threat to our students, by at least a factor of 10, probably a factor of 50, is suicide, not active shooter threats.
Yep.
And if we wanted to spend our money wisely, we would spend 10 times as much on suicide prevention among our students as we do on protecting them from active shooters. So first of all, I see some very positive trauma-informed way we're doing this. It's a vast improvement. That we're paying attention to this right up front, because it is important to consider this, and I will put this again, since 2015 or so, suicide rates among young people have been increasing dramatically. People don't know why, but one of the things they talk about is climate anxiety. One of the things they talk about is what's going on with violence in the schools, and the response to that, which is creating an atmosphere of fear. And we need to be very, very careful, because it would be very easy to induce a response that's actually disproportionate to the problem, and actually worse than the problem.
Yes, I would agree.
So we need to be very, very careful. We always need to keep that foremost in our mind when we're thinking about these things.
Well, and I think that your student services group, headed by Krista Foster, has created a really strong group of people to respond to traumatic events from an emotional side. Prepared to is not a new training for them. This has been going on since Act 143 in 2017, 2018. And before that, they were also doing things to help students deal with the stresses of, obviously, the violence in the schools, or the perception of violence in the schools.
Perception, yes.
And I would say that, and the other things that come into it, social media has had a huge impact on people's mental health. And her team has been really, I would say, very strong in addressing those issues. And so I think what we're doing right now is we're building, basically using the framework and the structures that they have to apply it to situations that we hope never happen, but we want to be trained for in case they do.
I mean, we know, the perception is what, there's a point you said, you know, statistically, the safest place for a student, for a child in the United States by far is inside a school building, despite all of the news, you know, all of the incidents we've heard about lately.
Yep.
And we want to make sure that kids, we do not lose that and make schools feel to the children like they're not safe there.
Right.
It's very important.
I totally agree. I would
Make
say
them
that
feel less safe.
it is necessary, though, to have schools that have a strong perimeter, that have a small a threat fabric, that we know that we have good control over our perimeter and what's coming or who's coming into our schools. But that's not sufficient to deal with all the other things that are going on.
Mhm.
And so we need to have, you know, good buildings, but we also need to have lots of structures within our buildings. And I mean, staff structures to deal with situations as.
But what I'm saying is it's important that it makes the kids feel safe, and
Exactly.
not that they make them feel like they're exposed, that the threat is overwhelming.
Yeah, and I think as we work on building or making our buildings harder, our
Mhm.
goal is to make it invisible. And so you walk by, you know, that security door 100 times a day, you never notice it. The only time you notice it is when we have to trigger it.
Thank you.
Okay, no other questions. Thank you again.
Thank
All
you
right,
very
I
much.
appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
All right, next is MG 21 Annual Report. Rebecca Blair.
Good evening. I'm Tom Stolper. I'm the president of the governance board for the Monona Grove Liberal Arts Charter School for the 21st century. Obviously, that's why we call it MG21. We're here tonight to present our accountability report for last school year, which is a requirement of our charter contract. So that's the point of call. But first, on behalf of our entire MG21 community, students, parents, staff, and the governance board, I want to thank this board and administration for your many years of support as we've grown. We added a middle school a number of years ago. I think Rebecca will talk about that briefly. And the enrollment for this year, current school year, is about 80. So we continue to climb and serve the population that wants to be served. We have a little bit about our board. We have 7 voting members currently on the MG21 governance board. 2 of them are new this year with the effect of the beginning of the school year, specifically Ryan Clearingbull and Sandy Homburg. And then we added another board member mid-year last year. We had a resignation and we added that person. That person happens to be Elizabeth Wheeler, who is right there. So she's on the board. But the governance board currently includes a parent, that's Elizabeth, and it includes a prior graduate who graduated 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. But we as a board and staff continue to monitor requirements for accountability and autonomy within our school. Our staff and our board are passionate about MG21 and its mission, and we're fully committed to learning and improving as we continue to serve our student body. That's why we exist, and we keep that foremost in our minds. So, enough prattling from me. This is the star of the show, Rebecca Fox-Blair, and she's going to go from
Tom,
here.
can I just add, I would encourage each and every board member, if you haven't had the opportunity, to go to any of the MG21 open houses and the graduation ceremony. It is the most incredible experience you will ever have.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
The interesting thing about the graduation ceremony is that each of the students has to give a talk, a personal reflection, which I find incredibly powerful. So I would echo that.
Yeah.
Please come to our graduation. Everybody's invited. You don't have to have a student in MG 21. Okay, Rebecca.
Hi, thanks so much for having us tonight. I'm Rebecca Fox-Blair, I'm the Executive Director of MG21. As you know, we're Monona Grove's project-based charter school. We're an instrumentality charter school, so we're part of the Monona Grove School District. We serve students grades 6 through 12. Just a little quick background history. In 2018, we received a 5-year federal charter school grant that ran through DPI to expand our school, and we were able to add a 6th, 7th, and 8th grade to our school. The first year was a planning year, and we didn't have students. We opened the building, we opened the middle campus in 2019, just in time for the pandemic. So growing the school's been a slow grow. We just finished year 4 of our grant. This year is our 5th year. It'll be our last year of the grant, and the grant will sunset on June 30th, 2023. Last year was our first full year in person as a 6-12 school, so it was a really exciting year to all be back together. But as many educators and students and families will tell you, it was also an incredibly challenging year. It was filled with growth as students and staff both tried to reintegrate back into school, into the building. We had to relearn kind of what it meant and felt like to be a community. We reconnected with one another, and in many ways we had to relearn how to do school. And so our goals for last year were to focus on community building, connection, and really amplifying student voice. So here's our report. I'm just going to kind of go through some of the highlights, and then please ask us questions. Our enrollment for last year was 71 students by the end of the year. This year we started the school year with 81 students. So we set enrollment goals for this year, and we met both at the middle campus and the upper campus. Last year our attendance rate was lower than it's ever been. We've never had an attendance rate lower than like 92 or 93%. It was 89.7, and that's just is what it is. It was in large part due to that, again, still living in the pandemic and absences related to illness and so on. We had one student that did not complete in our graduating class and chose not to return this year. But we did focus, as we returned to school, on that idea of community building, connection, and student voice. And so the first thing that happened last year is our students, led by one of our new teachers, Joel Jarosky, formed a student voice committee. And that student committee has worked to really determine what students are concerned about, what they want to have action about, and then to give them the power to make change and promote their goals. And one of the things that group did was to initiate a proposal to have a student representative on our governance board. And we learned a lot. We learned that really student voice is a very powerful thing, and continuing into this year, we've taken that forward. The Student Voice Committee continues, as well as our students have a GSA that started this year as well. That is a 6-12 program. We leaned heavily into our project-based learning, and we brought that back from the school closure into our building. We created a new schedule that is an A day, B day, C day schedule for us, and we incorporated a lot of opportunities for students. And so we still have our teacher-led projects that are more like traditional classes. We have student-led projects and community-led projects where we're bringing in community experts to teach seminars and workshops with our students. but we really kind of leaned into the idea of creating a lot of flexibility in our schedule and making sure that students had a lot of opportunities. We got feedback from our students that they wanted more career and community exploration. We took advantage of the opportunity from MGEF and wrote a Brant grant and created some Leaving to Learns where we were able to take our students to colleges and to do some service opportunities at the end of last year, and we've brought that forward into this year. We've also expanded our connection with the Youth Apprenticeship Program, the Dane County Consortium, and we were able to offer the STEPS Employability class in-house for our students last year. And our parent-teacher forum really took off last year, and they had 2 kind of open house events for families that were pretty well attended, one out in the Cottage Grove School Forest, where our middle campus students have been doing a lot of service work, and one here on site out in our school garden. And that parent-teacher forum has continued to expand into this year. Oh, as part of the Brant grant, one of the things that we did was we did do a business brunch where we invited local community businesses to come in and have brunch with our students. So the pictures on the screen are students presenting to those community members that came in. We're fortunate to have a parent who is a coordinator for Dane Buy Local, and so she was able to connect us with a lot of local businesses, and so that's been a really great partnership. The performance measures for the school are measures that we're required to submit as part of our grant to the Department of Public Instruction. These are submitted at the end of the year, so they went to DPI in July. Just some highlights of that data. Our HOPE survey data, which measures kind of student autonomy, belonging, and connection to the school, continues to show growth from when students join our school and to how they feel at the end of the school year. 95% of our students demonstrated growth in their understanding of project-based learning and their ability to participate in student-led projects. Our iReady math data still isn't where we'd like it to be, but we did compare that data to kind of the forward data. It's statewide. The board wanted some kind of comparison points. And so if you look at our forward scores compared to the state forward scores, sorry, this is very tiny. You can see that our data, 29.4% of our students scored at proficient and compared to 39.2% statewide. But you will notice that almost 12% of our students opted out of the test. And because of our small cell size, especially at the middle campus, that potentially can really skew our data. So just to take that as a point of consideration. The same is true with our iReady reading data. It's a little bit stronger. We had 47% at grade or above level for reading, and that compared to the GDS scores of 54%. And then again, looking at that forward data, we scored at like 35.3%, and statewide it was 37, again at proficient. I think overall, schools struggled to have strong testing data this first year back. And again, our small cell size at the middle campus kind of skews our data a little bit. Parent involvement was very strong for us last year. We had 100% of parents being able to attend our 4 family learning partnership meetings, and we offered those in a combination of in-person or virtual, depending on what families preferred. Our student wellness was really strong also last year. We've really leaned heavily into our outdoor education curriculum, and our students are outside a lot at the middle campus. They have 3 wilderness weeks that they run throughout the year. They're just in the middle of one right now, and they just spent the day in the rain doing geocaching and mapping out at the school forest. They've done a lot of service work out there. Last year, they rebuilt a bunch of the benches, and they cleared a lot of trails. They're working on signage, and like you said, mapping is this year's kind of theme for them. Our senior portfolio, 13 out of 14 were proficient or exceptional on the portfolio and on their graduation speech, and 100% of our students scored 80% or better on the state of Wisconsin government exam, and 100% of our students participated in different service learning projects that we did throughout the year. Our discipline data, just very briefly, we had 16 incidents last year. That is down, up from our 1 from the year of school closure, but down from the years previous to it. And as far as our work with the restorative practices, we continue, we're in year 7 or 8 of our partnership with the YWCA. We have an on-site restorative justice coordinator who helped. Last year, we had 50% of our students participate in either support circles or harm repair circles. We had 100% of our students who participated in restorative justice practices, and we had 23% of our students that were trained as circle keepers across both campuses. Professional development last year is listed here. It's a little bit less than in years past, mostly because there weren't a lot of in-person conferences last year. A lot of things were canceled still. And then again, our continuous improvement goals, some of this is redundant, but again, we continue to work to expand our college and career readiness and post-high school planning. We continued with our work around restorative justice, our community outreach. We offered a lot of different seminars and community opportunities for students. We worked with Dane Buy Local to do the business brunch, as well as find internship and new job opportunities for students. In the curriculum realm, we have finalized our 612 priority standards. We implemented the outdoor education program, and we continue to work on our math education program with our 612 math curriculum with a focus on algebra, geometry, and statistics and probability skills. And we have some advanced math options for our students who are advanced math learners. What's new for this year? We have new staff members. We had some staff turnover last year, and we were also able to add 2 SEAs to support our students. We have a new social worker and a new special education teacher at the upper campus, and we have a new part-time special education teacher at the middle campus who's shared with the Monona Grove High School. There's our new social worker. She's very nice. And one of the big things we've done that's been really, the students are really loving and we're finding great success with is we took that leaving to learn piece and we really expanded it, and we added a new course that all students are taking that's called Pathfinding. And it's offered twice a week on the in-class day, focuses on, the whole course focuses on post-high school planning, career options, and learning through interest. And so students are identifying their own passions and interests, and then we're connecting them with community experts and community resources. So right now they're in the process of doing informational interviews in areas that they're interested in, and then that will segue into some job shadows and some potential internships and a lot of opportunities for students to pursue their interests and kind of have a really solid plan moving forward for post-high school. And so that's been really exciting, and then we've been able to do a lot more leaving to learns. And so on Fridays, our students are going out and they're going into businesses. We've been to the apprenticeship fair that Dan mentioned. Our students all went to that, the whole upper campus went. We've been to UW Whitewater, we're going to UW Baraboo tomorrow or Friday, because that's a 2-year campus with dorms, and that it feeds directly into UW Platteville, so we thought that was really an important thing for our students to see. So we've been trying to kind of mix that up with a combination of business and career exploration as well as post-high school opportunities. We do have a student rep that now officially sits on our governance board. They're a non-voting member, but they attend all our meetings, and they're kind of the liaison between the students and the board. And so they do a report every month, and then they report back to the students after attending our board meetings. We have a new gender-neutral bathroom. We have an all-gender bathroom. Thank you very much to the district. That opened this year. It's really terrific, and our students have loved it. At the upper campus, there's just one all-gender bathroom, and it's been very successful and very much appreciated by the students. Last couple things, we are doing all-school community circles, 612. We do them every month. At the beginning of the month, we start together. And so we've built a real strong culture connecting middle campus and upper campus. We do an all-school active block where students are doing PE basically together, but we have lots of different opportunities. So they're playing street hockey out with Jean, or they're doing boot camp fitness in the building, or lots of different things. Our parent-teacher forum continues to expand. They've gone to a model where they're doing virtual or in-person every other month, and they've had really strong attendance. We had a big ice cream social to start the school year off, and it was so well attended, we were really surprised. We continue to explore how shared leadership and teacher-led kind of works in our school as it continues to grow. And so we're working with Monona Grove MG21 staff, the students, the board, the district, and the Wisconsin Resource Center for Charter Schools to research different leadership models and structures and figure out what's going to serve our students best moving forward. Our charter will need to be renewed in 2024, and we're hoping to create some language around what we'd like our leadership structure to look like moving forward. And the last thing is we've been piloting our literacy and personal growth competencies and expanding our ability to track them in infant campus. So on the addendum, you would have seen curriculum summaries for both the middle campus and upper campus. You would have seen our final budget reports for both the grant and the regular budget, and you would see our data from the parent and student surveys. Questions?
I have two unrelated questions. So you mentioned that you applied for a grant and that it's close to the end of it. So what is the process? Do you reapply, and do you expect to receive funding again?
No, the grant is an expansion grant, so the purpose of the grant was just to expand and add the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and the money could only be used to support that. It wasn't used for any kind of sustainable costs. All of that had to be paid for in-house, so there won't, it was used to basically purchase furniture, purchase materials, purchase supplies, allow staff to have time to write curriculum. So that's what the...
Do the construction.
Do the construction. There's moderate costs that could be done for remodeling. And so that's what the person bought the van. So things like that could be used, but they were one-time startup costs for this grant. So we will not be reapplying for the grant.
Okay, thank you. And then the other question I had was regarding the iReady test. So they are a little low, so do you have some areas that you're going to work on to try to help improve in that area?
Absolutely. So again, you know, we've moved to a workshop model for the math program. It's a challenge by choice, but they also are doing kind of small group work and small group teaching, and I think it's being very successful. It allows students to really focus in on areas that they need to grow in. And then as far as our reading and writing, our writing data is very strong. Our kids, 72% of our students made growth in writing, and so, but they continue to do writing workshops. They're doing a partnership with Children's Theater of Madison, doing the Playwrights for Change program, and so there's a lot of writing opportunities. And reading, I think, they're making great, success, working one-to-one with students that need support, as well as lots of opportunities for reading for the students.
Great. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Susan?
I particularly, Rebecca, want to thank you for, under your performance measures, number 6, the social emotional growth, and I think that's one of the things that, again, the comfort of being with you in your program, and it's so highly exemplified in this information. They grew in all 6 of the hope pillars: belongingness, goal orientation, engagement, hope, efficacy. I mean, when we come in, when you invite us in just to see the students and be around them, they'll be playing instruments in a room and reading in another room and building in another room, and then moving to the next one, and they just appear to feel so comfortable and connected to that environment. And I just think that's such a huge factor in the learning of all of our students. And then you do that just so well. And then you evaluate it just in case not.
Well, thank you, and I feel like that was really our focus for last year, and I think it was for most schools, was just trying to reconnect with students and rebuild the culture, the community of schools after, you know, having the school closure time. And so I think that was, you know, a real focus for us.
I just want to add on to Susan's comments. One of the things I really appreciate is the student voice piece. I think I even mentioned to Krista, which one of the things I know from my own daughter is from in your meetings, you have their student-led for IEP meetings, which is phenomenal to give students a voice. So I really appreciate like all of the programs that you are encouraging students to have more of a voice. So
Thank you so much.
Eric?
Well, I just want to say thank you very much for the opportunity for some of the students in our district, Rebecca, and for NG21. It would have certainly benefited me, someone who was removed from ninth grade, not expelled, but removed by my parents. This was a perfect program. I went on to get my doctorate, so I mean, it's not a sign of intelligence, you know, our system's not built for everyone. And, you know, the other comment I would be is, I'm not concerned about the test scores. I look at actually the 12% and opt-out, and I think that's pretty clever and smart of some of the students. The test doesn't benefit the students, it benefits us. So I see that number as a high number that I'm not concerned about, just so you know. So thank you.
Well, I wanted to know, first of all, your reports get better and more comprehensive every year after year, and I'm like, who does that? You know, they should become more sort of ordinary and remote, but no, they're getting better and more comprehensive, so I really do appreciate that.
The board's input was to put some more pictures in.
What I would like to ask is, if I said to you, what evidence do you have of improving outcomes for your students? What would you say?
I would say a couple of things. I would say that the middle campus is a really great program right now. It's just a great place. And when you walk in, you can walk in at any time of the day and you can see really great things happening. It's got a great energy and a great feel. We have a lot of students that chose our school because it's a project-based school and they are project-based kids. And so that's a huge thing for us, because initially I think, you know, people weren't sure, what is this middle campus? Is this going to be like, who's going to be going there? And I feel like right now, if you walk in the doors there, you're going to see a lot of great collaboration and a lot of great activities happening there. So that would be one thing I would say. At the upper campus, what I would say is we have a lot of students who are leaving our program, especially this year more than ever, who have really strong visions for where they want to go and what they want to do and who they are. And so I think, you know, that would be another measure of success that we look at is, you know, how confident are our students when they walk out the doors of our school.
Then I always ask this question, which is, what lessons have you learned that you might apply to our general student population?
I think there's some of the same lessons that everybody learned, which was that connection matters, that relationships matter, that's the heart of what we're doing at the school, at any school, is building those connections and those relationships. And that after that is solid, that's when then you've created the place where learning happens and kids grow.
Shifting back to in-person learning from so much virtual learning, is there anything that you learned from the virtual learning that you wish to build, you continue to build on, I guess?
I think just the idea of having lots of opportunities for students and trying to meet families and students in different ways. So when we're doing even the learning partnership meetings this year, we had opportunities if a family preferred to be virtual, we're going to meet families where they are. Being able to offer those kinds of opportunities, I think, I think all schools kind of learned that about taking advantage of technology to really bring more families in and connect more people.
Well, thank you again.
Thank you all so much.
I just had one comment, if I can get through this without repeating my coughing jag that I just had. And I kind of say the same thing every year too. Not only, I would agree with Peter, your reports get more comprehensive, but your program just continues to grow in different ways every year. I'm just so impressed with that. I mean, you've never been content to rest on anything, any year. And I think, you know, the project-based learning style lends itself, and you know, test scores or something, I mean, you do want to get some kind of measure of math and that kind of abilities, but kids are coming to you having completed several years of school elsewhere, for one thing, and so they're in different places, and I really appreciate the work that you've done, and math has been an area where you've done some significant work over the last few years to, you know, improve your offering and give more give more opportunities to kids. And yeah, I just thank you so much for what you do, because it's truly great. And you know, not only the graduation speeches, and I would agree they're always very powerful, and you really get a sense of how important the school and your staff is to all these kids. But the open houses, the thing that's cool about that is the kids take such ownership and such pride in everything that they do, and they, you know, you can walk into any room and there'll be students there willing to show you what they're doing and explain their programs and have you read their essay, and I mean, it's you don't find that in a lot of other places where the kids that really want to show you what they're doing, so kudos to you for all your work.
We do think a little bit in terms of experimenting and trying new things. If they work, let's do more.
Right, and you have to do that, I think, sometimes.
Out they go, and
Yep.
we try something else, and we're a small enough school that we can do that.
Yeah, you can be a little
And we
more
can
nimble
pivot.
and,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And
Yeah,
I
no.
just want to say also, I think a lot of that comes from our staff. We have a really terrific staff, and they bring a lot of new ideas and new energy to the table. And being a small school, a teacher-led school, we're able to really leverage the staff voices as well as the student voices.
Right,
So,
yeah.
I do want to make sure that you know and you have on your calendar, February 1st is our open house and exhibition night. So please know that you're invited. You'll probably get an invitation from the students in the next couple of weeks, but it's a 4:30 to 7 o'clock, and there'll be projects on exhibition and an open house. So thank you again for your time tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks.
very much.
And I'm sorry I have to miss that, I'll be out of town.
All right, next is the superintendent report. Dan?
Okay, so we've got a longer agenda tonight, so I'm just going to have one brief item that I'd like to report on. We all, I think, are aware right now what's happening with the illness that is happening with students and staff, with all of us, right? And so just, I gave you a little bit of data as far as our attendance this week. I gave a snapshot of Monday's attendance, where we had 560 students out. That's about 15% of our students. On a normal day, our attendance rate, you know, that's double, you know, what we would normally have. And it's been consistent, you know, that way all week long. As far as teachers out, likewise, that's higher than normal. Keep in mind, we have just over 300 teachers, so, you know, the teacher illness rate, we have about 7% out this week. And so it's something Krista and I have talked a little bit about is, you know, hopefully this is a phase and things will, you know, settle down. But you know, at what point would we make a decision about, can we keep a school open? Some of the schools have had, you know, more illness than others. Essentially, our decision will be, do we have the staff to keep the, you know, it's not an issue. We've communicated with public health. It's not so much an issue of closing because of spread. It's really about, can we, you know, safely staff the school? So our principals and our staff, right, all are doing phenomenal work, covering for each other in these, you know, challenging times. And we're hopefully that we're at a high point here and things will settle down. But, you know, we've got January and February to get through, so we'll certainly, you know, keep an eye on that.
Are we prepared in those circumstances to do some sort of virtual programming?
Yeah, at this point, that would be our first choice. If we only needed to close for a day or two, we've got enough instructional hours in that we don't really see that as a huge educational benefit if it's just a single day.
Mhm.
If we had something extended, I think we'd have to take a you know, closer look at that.
Mhm.
But I don't think that we'd see that as highly effective instruction, you know, for a single day off.
You know, I know of a school district, they've done something interesting, which is they get rid of snow days. They have e-learning days.
Yeah.
And they can also throw those in at any time for other reasons as they need them.
So interesting that you brought that up. The board is going to have that conversation next month. That because the high school is a much smaller group, a lot less hours to give for, you know, snow days or other inclement weather. So that will be one of the options that we'd want to consider if we would have additional snow days, as opposed to making students make up additional days in June. That we would look at some e-learning days on days that were scheduled off. And so we actually are going to be bringing a proposal to you next month for you know, consideration to do that, should we need them at the high school.
You know, one of the ideas is that these things are built into the schedule, not built into the schedule, but built into the time. And they're going to use that time, that instruction time, different ways to do different things than they would in the classroom. So it's not just a one replacement, but it's like, oh, we're going to have time. And if we don't have these snow days, we're going to still throw in those e-learning days, and the kids will do some project-based stuff and so on. That's a little different. And so there's this continuity that's not interrupted. Essentially by these snow days, and it gives them an opportunity to do things a little differently.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, more to come on that. So the high school has had those conversations, and you know, basically out of need because of the hours.
Dee and I would just add, as much anticipating that happening in advance notice as possible,
Yeah.
because of the schedule disruption for parents,
Yeah.
you know, and my daughter was gone 4 days last week, so we are going through this.
Yeah,
But everybody
yeah.
else is going through, so, you know, but if it comes to closing the school, I think working with the principals to try to anticipate that, even if you might have to make a call, you know, estimated, it would be easier for families to adjust to that,
Yeah.
so.
Agreed. And I will say, as much as they said this has been significant, right? It's been quite stressful. I would say that it's not like we're on the verge of closing.
Yeah.
You know, so I think it would have to get a lot worse before we get to that.
And hopefully it won't get there, so.
Yeah.
All right, no other questions? Thank you, Dan. All right, board reports. Personnel committee, Susan Fox?
All right, the Personnel Committee met on December 5th with the MGEA, continuing negotiations with the MGEA and the paraprofessionals for bargaining over base wages and base wage distribution. We still have not reached an agreement, and we will meet again in January. So that's a short report.
All right, thank you. Teaching, Lettering, and Equity Committee, Elizabeth is out today, and she does have notes, but I'll have her to present it at the next meeting. All right, and then next is possible action items. Chemistry.
Gentlemen, may I use that term loosely?
Could I just add to that, again, the Teaching, Learning, Equity Committee, you may also want, Lisa just did a superb presentation at that meeting, and I know it was limited to the committee that was there. You might add a summary from Lisa as well. Again, that information was extremely well done, very succinct, very, clear.
I agree. All right.
All right, thank you.
You go ahead.
Yeah, okay, so we have Kevin Korn and Nick Lalash from McKinstry. As we talked on Monday night about some, future projects and had proposed some energy efficiency things, there were some questions, and McKinstry's been with the district, I don't know, Kevin, how long?
Oh my gosh,
10 years, and doing a lot of our energy efficiency, including the project. So I thought it was, we were looking to have some kind of resolution to moving forward for this, and we thought it would be good for these guys to come in and just kind of go through maybe a little more detail than we talked about on Monday, and then answer any questions. I know there was a couple of questions from board members about the projects, the energy efficiency ones, not the locker and press box. So I will turn it over to Nick.
Yeah, thank you. Good to see you all again. Always good to come back to see the district. We see a
the good, the bad, and ugly of board meetings, so you guys definitely rank on the good side of that. If you want some bad ones, I can talk about. Yeah, I think the synergy, and, you know, we're proud to be on the team relative to continuing a path to sustainability, and certainly the solar work that the sustainability team brought in. So what Dan and Mark had kind of challenged us to do was, you know, the high school, believe it or not, is 23 years old. It's part of getting old. I look at these schools and think, man, that school is just built. So we've got a couple of infrastructure things relative to the chiller and the boiler that are kind of front of mind relative to some redundancy and some capability there. Coincidentally, we're doing the exact same chiller project for Waupun. It almost was a cookie cutter mechanical design of what you have, so we had some experience with that. And so what Dan and Mark challenged us to do was, hey, is there a way we can bundle this with some incentive money? Because really the boilers and the chillers aren't gonna get you a huge energy return. It's really the end of the useful life thing. The lighting project will return, but the retro commissioning and what we call the active energy management will really get you a nice dashboard into the continuum of what you've all done and get that out front and center. We've shown a little bit with the also energy on the solar, but this will really show, and I think, you know, given the state funding formula and the way that you're trying to do capital projects and also, you know, fight that challenge, you know, budgeting, that's a lot of what our work is now, is to bundle this and get the funding formula in. So when we roll those projects together, it has a nice economic return, given the incentive of $161,000, and then the energy savings and Fund 10 avoidance of about $231. So it really returns itself in about 7 years relative to that. And market challenged us too relative to why bundle. You know, we can do bid packages much like you did with the referendum work. If we're going out for mechanical bids, we can do the boilers and chillers together. We can get some economy of scales on the electrical bidding. And so, and as you know, we reconcile. So if we do have savings, that goes back to the district. And Mark and Dan have already kind of run us through the ringer on making sure that you're getting best value. So all of that bidding is publicly done, and we reconcile the budgets to those bids. We also included some time for the grant. There's some federal money coming down that you're probably all aware of with the IRA Act. There's some coming as soon as January, which are really related more to renewable projects. They're looking for renewable or geothermal. They're looking for things that have a little bit of a unique energy twist, and they're also focusing a lot of that money at disadvantaged districts. So what our focus really would be for you would to say, hey, if there's an appetite to do more solar, do the EIGB, you know, play, do the IRA funding around that, because that really, and now we'll have all that evidence to take forward in a business case to go after that funding. So that's our recommendation for that. And I know the committee did some heavy lift on the grant, and I think, you know, we had some input on that. So I think we've got some time in for that. We've got a team in Seattle that Kevin's connected to that's staying out in front of this federal funding. It's a little bit of a moving target, as you can imagine, a little political, but I think we'll come back to you with updates throughout this phase to let you know where that might be and where the next play might be. So, so that's really the project. Any questions around that from an economic standpoint, or the rationale for bundling? Peter, you're laughing at me.
No, continue then. I'll ask more questions.
I think there's gonna be a loaded question at the end. Here's the detail that I'm sure Sue Manning and Sue Fox are waiting for. Chiller's 23 years old. ASHRAE says they should last 17. Jeff Carr and team have been doing a little MacGyvering on those systems. It's got an old refrigerant in it. One of the compressor loops is failing, and it's kind of hard to get parts. The other thing we're fighting with the supply chain issues is the lead time on this equipment is 30 to 45 weeks probably. So another thought around the essence of getting moving now. The boilers, if you remember, we did kind of a phase one. You had 7 original modular boilers there. That was kind of the in vogue thing around 2000. The best thinking now is to go to, we put 2 in initially to replace the initial ones, and now we would put 2 more in, and that would, you know, get the runtime going and get you back to full redundancy. So that's really the technical reasons around that, and that with the lead time is why we thought bringing it bundled would make sense. So, but as you know, the way we roll it, it's your project, it's your way. So any input or comments around that would be appreciated.
Peter?
Here it comes.
So no. So the boiler system, we had 7, now we have 2, and you're gonna add 2 more. Is that where we are?
Yeah, you're gonna end up with 4 larger ones.
So
yeah.
so we're gonna have 4 larger ones instead of 7, and right now we only have 2. And what we want is the 4 for full redundancy.
Yeah, Brent's probably got something to answer to that.
Yeah, so we replaced 2.
Why are you hiding back there? Didn't even know you were here.
We replaced 2 with that first phase. We removed 2. There's 1 that's already missing. There are 3 that are remaining. So we're going to replace the 3 that are remaining, and then you will have a brand new boiler plant of 4 boilers with the N+1 redundancy, so that you can get the correct cycling through the systems and get the right amount of operating hours for each of the boilers. Finishing out the boiler plant how it really should be. We needed to get the first phase done because the boiler plant was failing and you were in jeopardy of having issues of heating the school over the winter. So now we're finishing out the boiler plant, making sure that you have the correct redundancy. You're not putting undue pressure on the 2 existing boilers that are new, and just finishing it out, getting the efficiency up to where it should be.
And what are the implications of waiting on the boiler project?
Pricing will increase. You could have issues with the boilers, existing boilers on a cold day. The 2 new boilers are not sufficient to meet the design, so you need a 3rd boiler to meet the design day. So if you have a cold day, you could have problems. So it needs to get done kind of as soon as possible.
Tell us about the active energy management system.
So as part of that, there's some retro commissioning that goes on with the existing HVAC system. That's really where the funding comes in, where you get 10 to 20 cents a square foot to do that. And essentially, we go in and validate all of the mechanical systems, primarily on the air side, to make sure that you've got proper indoor air quality and the sequences are working properly. It's not uncommon for systems to do some redundant heating and cooling where you're bringing in too much outside air and you don't really realize it because the heating coil will just pick that up. So it kind of baselines that out, and it will come back with some savings around that as well, in addition to the incentive. And it'll give you that dashboard then that's license-free software that the district will have. There's no link back to us. It's just, and so you'll have proof of proper indoor air conditions. You'll have energy savings tracking on there. It'll give you utility tracking. So there's different modules there. So if somebody said, hey, Monona, what have you done? And Oregon's a great case. I mean, Oregon loves to toot their horn on what they all did. This will give you a website that you can show your neighbors. Peter, you might do that. The rest of you probably won't. But you'd be able to show, hey, here's all the things we're done, and here's our path to sustainability. And quite honestly, the fact you're being great stewards with the money and the environment, you know, as you move into maybe a public play going forward. So I think it ties a lot of that off from that standpoint as well. So.
And the folks on energy incentive is to fund that. That's the part of the project that's incentivized by the folks on energy.
Well, you get some for the boilers and the boilers, the chillers, and the lighting.
Oh, so, okay.
So, but about 81,000 of that, Brent, if I say that right, is the retro commissioning and the active energy management. So it's a good lift, and that's a grant that's time bound. You know, that may not be there going forward based on their monies. So.
And the fund relief of $231,000 a year, that's all energy savings?
That's about 70-some thousand in energy, and then what we do is, we look at, if you did the project over 5 years,
Mhm.
you would capitalize the project, so there's some relief there under Fund 10. So essentially, now as you look to reduce your operating expenses from a energy standpoint, you also get some relief going forward on the capital, because you won't need to do that if you fund it through the energy savings play, so.
I think I understand that. Okay. All right, and the lighting upgrades, is there an energy savings associated with those?
Yes.
Do we know what that is?
You remember, Brian?
You remember, Brent?
I wanna say they were like $28,000 a year.
We can send you a pie chart on that.
Sure. And what's the cost of that lighting upgrade? I haven't seen that broken out anywhere.
We can break those down,
I think it's about 630.
yeah.
I think it was something like that.
Okay.
And that would add lighting controls as well that aren't currently there, Peter.
And that would complete the lighting for the district, then all lighting
Right.
would be up to standards.
Mm-hmm. And actually, this is the second time we've done a lighting upgrade there, isn't it? Because the first time, didn't we change to the T8s?
T8s,
yes.
Yeah,
A long time ago.
yeah. I thought that was the,
Yeah.
Yeah.
we changed, what we did was we put in more efficient fluorescence. Just before fluorescence became obsolete.
It's kind of like Moore's Law of lighting, you know, it just keeps getting better, but this is a retrofit, so it'll look like brand new fixtures, the only thing that remains is the housing essentially. So-
Okay. And that's similar to what we did with the high school
Yep.
previously. And just tell us the IRA funding you anticipate.
For this, are you talking about going forward?
Is there something in this package? I'm
There's
looking at your
not.
page. There's not in this package.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because they're really looking for renewable. The play coming out for next year, and the funding's probably gonna be in alignment for when you would consider a potential next phase, is the direct pay of the tax credit. So, you know, business entities, like we're working with Harbo down in Pleasant Prairie, the gummy, gummy beer people, we're putting solar there. So they get a 30% tax credit or close to that. So what the government did is said, hey, public entities, we could come up with a direct pay, and it's 30, it ranks up to, there's a couple qualifiers similar to the EIGB, where the Buy American and a couple other triggers that buy that down by a 30% direct pay. So you get, the district will get a direct check for that.
But that would be on future projects. It's nothing
Yeah,
involved
and
with
it's
this.
heavily weighted for solar. So that's why a project like this, you're better off maximizing the focus money on this. And then, so that would be our recommendation for that. So that, this first round, there's about 500 million, and they're gonna allocate 80 million in the next 6 months. Is really gonna go to disadvantage, heavy free and reduced districts, and people with compelling needs around an energy story. So unfortunately, you guys are kind of in the class where you've already done a lot, so the renewable is really your next play to get at that funding.
Are these savings, any of this, do we have a performance guarantee, or are we doing that?
Yes.
We're also doing that, okay.
Is IRA,
Inflation
Inflation
Reduction
Reduction?
Act, yes.
That's a title, huh?
Yeah.
Do other board members have questions? Susan?
I just want to say, you know, we've relied on McKinstry for years, and if you came to Peter's committee meetings, they were there for all the meetings, supporting everything your committee did. And if you had an opportunity to actually walk on the roof of the high school, which was somewhat terrifying.
Climb on the roof.
Yeah, I know. It was absolutely incredible. Just an incredible project. The thing that really has been great for me to watch over the years is that you're there on all the projects, not just one. We've been looking at the lighting at Glacial Drumlin since right, Peter, since we opened that building. And then wasn't the HIVAC stuff as well. And you've never pushed us to do the project. You've given us solid rationale for making a board decision to support the project in the energy efficiency. And I think that's been a very positive relationship with the district. And the work that you do for us, you'll turn around every year and have a list of 5 things, you know, that, and then you can show us what we can save.
We're getting close to being done though, so, you know, I your money for your education side, but yeah, you guys are, and that's the value of this active energy management, or really highlight and put a good commercial out for what you've done as a district. And obviously educationally, you do great too, so this is, well, we appreciate those comments. I think you weren't even on the committee and you were at the meeting.
I know, but I had a neighbor who was ringing my doorbell.
One more question, do we have any performance data right now on the solar array?
It's starting to come through, yes. So unfortunately this week with the cloudy, but it's still producing. So yes, it is producing. We got that Tuesday, I think.
What'd you get Tuesday? What'd you get?
Yeah.
So we'll forward it.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
please.
it's your website is active, and it's kind of, it's, I'm gonna geek out about it, but it is pretty cool. It's pretty neat. Even with, like I said, these cloudy days, it's still producing a lot of energy for the high school. So.
Yeah, appreciate it if you could forward it to me.
Is there-
Forward to us.
I mean, I've got the link I can share. Is there any other information, or if I just basically?
No, they would share that,
with you?
that link, and then Jeff is the owner or administrator right now.
Mhm.
But that's for you guys to decide,
Yeah.
you know, how to distribute that, so.
Okay. All right, I'll share it out before we leave today.
Okay.
It might be good for us to maybe just come back and highlight that a little bit as we
Yeah.
begin the active energy management, just because those modules are gonna come in pretty quick. Because, as you know, the offset there is pretty high relative to that, so certainly want to highlight.
But when you see it, yeah, it's cool when you look at that.
I had just one question, going back to the boiler and chiller. Mark shared with us the lead time was roughly 30+ weeks, not months.
For the chiller, yes, the boilers, I believe are a little quicker than that, right?
Yeah, much quicker than
Yeah.
that in comparison.
Okay.
They'll be ready for the heating season of 2023, 2024.
The big thing is just getting the order placed. We can still do the competitive bidding on the install. So just getting I mean, these lead times are just incredible to me. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like chips in cars and other things. Electrical, we're doing a big solar down at Parkside, a couple megawatts like we did at Platteville. And it's good to be in the transformer business right now, but they can't get them for a year, but the price is just crazy high, so, but,
That's why my nephew got a raise.
so hopefully that'll calm down a little bit with the inflation backing off a little bit.
Is there room for a geothermal field at the high school?
What's that?
Is there room for a geothermal field at the high school?
I don't know.
Put one on the football field at Madison West, right?
Oh, yeah.
All right, there's no other board questions. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So then that leads us in, if we would want to pull up the memo that Mark provided for you for the capital projects, we are looking for approval of the proposal this evening.
For the capital maintenance project.
Correct. Yes, thank you.
I'd move approval of capital maintenance projects as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Ayes have it, motion is carried. Okay, next is policy revisions, second reading.
Okay, well, we presented at the last board meeting, and as mentioned, in the second reading, so I think if there, we'll see if there are any questions. Just a normal Neola update. I think a lot of these are kind of procedural. I did also attach the document from Neola that provides a little bit of explanation for the rationale for the policy revisions.
And I haven't received any written amendments to the amendments. So it would seem that I would recommend that the policy amendments be approved as presented.
Do you want to make that, are you making that a motion?
Yes. I would
So
make
so you moved that they'll be approved as presented?
I
Okay,
move
then
that the policy amendments be
I'll
approved as presented.
I'll second that.
All right, any further discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it, motion is carried.
I'll just comment, I apologize, it was properly noticed as an action item. At board docs, I mistakenly called it discussion, but, so,
What was
apologize for
that?
that. On the second reading,
It's under
Oh,
action.
it's under action items, but if you look underneath the actual document.
Yeah, it says-
normally we have-
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Normally, we have the recommended
Yeah.
motion,
Oh.
and so that's my fault, I missed that,
No
Oh,
problem.
I don't know if there was one. Anyway, okay.
so.
All right, next is student representation at board meetings.
Okay, I'll begin. So we actually were recently contacted from a student inquiring about the potential of having a student rep on the board. You may recall back in 2019, you actually adopted a policy that would allow you to have student representation. And my recollection is that next school year, then that was, I'm not sure why we didn't have one in the fall, if we didn't have interest at that time. Then, of course, we had the pandemic, and so, so if you are interested in having a student rep, the policy states that the high school administration will come up with a process for selecting a student representation. And so my recommendation would be that at this time, even though the policy states that it should be for a school year period, obviously you can override that with your own motion if you'd like to consider having a person for the second semester. And so if so, you just simply need a motion to direct the high school administration to bring forth a candidate for you. And if you do that, I would work very closely with the administration on the process in doing so. So that's kind of the procedural part.
Okay. Oh, I see. So what's going on, we have a procedure, but it goes for the school year, and if we want to do it now, we have to.
Yeah, normally it'd be in the
change
fall, so I think it'd be, the right thing.
Yes.
I move to direct the high school administration to select a student representative to the board in accordance with board policy 0141.1 for the remainder of the 2022-2023 school year.
That's second.
And just a comment, you know, it may be a little harder to jump in. We haven't had a student because we haven't had the interest, and I think, I'm excited that we, and the pandemic
Yeah.
was part of that, but even before that, I mean, we had one who had just left when I got on the board, which is 15 years ago. We haven't had interest since then, so I'm excited that there's a student that wants to do this. I think it's great, so I'm all about encouraging it, so.
And I'll just add to that, as far as the mid-year part, as you know, our board meetings the last couple of months, in the fall is probably our slowest time as far as, the type of action items. Things clearly ramp up right now, and moving into the next year, a lot of important decisions that you'll be making, so January through May, we'll have a little bit. So I think with that, my point is, I think there's nothing wrong with someone joining that mid-year. I don't think they missed a whole lot by missing the fall.
Yeah, no, I think it's fine.
Well, and I think too, one of the things Rebecca talked about was pathways for students. And again, this is a pathway to understanding board governance and the educational process and no funding and, all the issues that we're confronted with instead of just going to school every day and saying, why haven't they fixed this? It's a pathway, and I think it's a great pathway if you have student interest. And I know that, Peter, it was your committee that had student
Students.
participation, and they were very active and involved in the work.
And I think this actually highlights, if you ask me, the importance of having, public participation in this case, student participation, but in general, public participation in things like board committees and so on, because it creates people who are interested in the function of the board and the governance, and who can help with that in the future.
I agree with my fellow board members, and I think having student voice is so important. So, all right, so we already have a motion, we did our discussion, and so we can go to vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it, motion is carried. Next is the election of school district treasurer.
Okay, so with the vacant seat, Mr. McKinney was the board treasurer, so you do need to elect a treasurer from the remaining members. And so it's the same process that you used in the reorganization meeting in April. You would start with a nomination, and then after the nominations, you would vote to approve, that one as treasurer.
Sure, I'll do it. Well, I kind of have to, don't
No.
Susan Manning could do it too,
I? Oh,
so.
I'll do it. I would love to do it. I'm really excited about it.
All right, I'll nominate Eric.
I accept.
And I would,
No, you.
thank you, but I'll withdraw.
Okay.
Oh, did you want to do it?
I would be willing to do it only because Jared trained me. And,
Well, see, I was going to say I would do it because I don't know anything about it, so it'd be a good thing for me to learn.
So,
Experience, there you go.
actually, you could,
There's really nothing to it.
So right.
If we borrow money, you sign the paper.
Yes.
And then, for the tax forms, you sign the tax forms.
And if he steals any money, your name's in the newspaper.
I don't mind doing it, Susan, if you don't mind.
No, I think
But if
that's
you want
fine.
to do it, that's totally fine.
no, I think that's absolutely fine. I've had the experience and I've learned a lot from that experience. Again, we have a great new Director of Business Services who provides great information to us, and so I feel very comfortable remaining as just a board member for that communication. And I don't have to sign those papers. Being a clerk was really.
Yeah, clerk is worse as far as signing.
That's more responsibility.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
or president.
Yeah, all right.
So.
We can just
We
vote.
also-
Yeah, we
Yeah,
can
so
vote.
procedurally, you've got one nomination on the floor, so then it just need a majority vote.
Can we just move to that Eric will serve as treasurer by acclamation? Did we?
I think
Okay,
that's
I'll
appropriate.
I make that motion then.
Okay.
Second.
All right, any further discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion is carried. You are now treasurer, Eric.
Okay, I need to make a note.
Congratulations.
All right, next is the designation of Wisconsin Association of School Board Delegate.
I would nominate Susan Fox.
And I would just say I am interested in doing this again. I did it for a few years before, and I'm going to the convention, and it sort of ties in with my legislative liaison role in my mind, so I'd be happy to do it unless somebody else wants it.
And you
That's
do
experience.
have to be there, and you give up quite a few of the
And you give up an
really great
afternoon, yeah.
workshops
Yeah.
to do it, which is commendable.
Yeah, but sometimes it's an interesting discussion to hear what other,
Yeah.
Yes.
it is-
Districts
it
have
is
to say.
interesting,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's the
Could be
more interesting
eye-opening.
part.
Mhm.
Who are these people?
Yeah.
I would support that. Eric and Peter?
Aye.
All right, so
Support.
I need a motion.
Oh, right, yeah, we can make a motion.
Motion,
I move approval of Susan Fox serving as the Wisconsin Association of School Board Delegate for 2022, 2023. Just got to it fast.
second.
All right, any further discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it, motion is carried.
And just one comment, the resolutions that will be on the agenda, our next agenda in January, and so take time to, they'll be posted. They're
Yeah, I
available
think
now on the
they're
Rockland
on-
website, so
yeah.
you can find them, but they'll be on the board docs
Yes.
too, right, so you
Yeah.
can,
And
Look
it'll
at
only
them
be a
for the meeting.
week, I think,
right, yeah.
because our
It's not-
meeting's
it's
the
not-
11th, and
yeah.
we go to Milwaukee on
Right.
the 18th.
So,
Andrew did give me the documents that are related to that, so make sure you get that.
okay.
Yeah, we always get a hard copy sent in the mail.
Okay,
so-
yeah, it is helpful to have the hard copy, because I
Yeah.
make notes on it, so then I won't print it. Actually, I might have already printed it, but I'll take it home too. Because he gets the ones that were proposed, I think he gets more, so, yeah,
Got it.
okay, thanks.
All right, next is the 2023-2024 school calendar.
Okay, so there's the proposed school calendar as well as a memo from Lisa Height that talks about the process, and this is very much a status quo calendar. We spent a lot of time, we feel really good about the way the calendar works. It was a little bit more challenging this year because of where the dates fall. The biggest thing to remember is that by law, we cannot begin before September 1st, and so it's a goal to also finish then by that first week in June, if we stay with our traditional dates for summer school, which Lisa also included in the memo. And so it gets a little bit tricky about where a couple of those vacation days are, but where the professional development days are essentially the same time. And we've looked at what's best, what we believe is best for staff for those PD days, trying to take into account what's best for families on vacations at certain times of the year. And as I mentioned, it's very much a status quo calendar, so I'd answer any questions.
Could you tell me, please, how you involve staff in developing the calendar this year?
Yeah, and it's outlined in the memo as well, but, so we started with the drafts. We actually came up with several drafts based upon just tweaking where those vacation days were and so on. And then every principal took it back to their school leadership team of teachers and shared with them, and so they all had an opportunity then to give input as well, brought it back to our admin team, and then we reached consensus on this calendar.
Thank you. I have approval of the 2023-2024 school calendar as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it, motion is carried. All right, next is the, we did the capital maintenance one, right?
Discussion.
So we're on discussion. So long-range budget planning.
Okay, so we of course had the workshop on Monday night. The presentation that's posted is the same information. Following the meeting, Mark and Katie and I did meet to kind of debrief, and we cleaned up the document a little bit, but we did not change any of the numbers or any of the factual information on there. So you have that as a reference. And then we again began a little bit of discussion about the process moving forward and so on. So I think tonight is a matter of opening up for discussion, kind of a continuation of where you left off on Monday evening. I don't know if Mark, you've got anything to add before we open it up for more discussion?
No, I've tried to get some information from different sources about what they think the governor will pass. They've been throwing around 300, 600 like we had in there. Obviously, the governor is 350, 650, but they've also heard 200, 400 might go, depending on how much the Republicans want to hold Evers hostage or whatever. So that's really the only updated information I have right now. So
Would that be 200, 400, 350, 60, whatever the number, would that be a regular increase like we haven't seen in the last few years, where we've just seen the 175, 179, which were one time not?
well, they're into that number then.
They're into that number.
Yeah, because it rolls to the next
Mhm.
year.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah, so this
Yeah.
mostly.
So that's a revenue limit increase.
Correct.
is what
Per
we're talking
pupil,
about.
on the
So
revenue limit.
spendable money is.
Right.
what that-
Correct. Correct.
And I
Which we
was,
haven't seen.
yeah, I think the biggest challenge is if, say it were 200, 400. In past years, that was essentially enough that we could, districts could manage. The problem is that doesn't fill the gap from the last
Right.
2 years, so that's our challenge, right, is to make up
Right, yeah.
that hole.
Right.
So,
No,
so you're projecting let's say, without additional revenue, zero increase, well, so we don't know, but the best case scenario you project, which is the $600 per student, we have a 2023 projection of 2023, which is the projection is $300. We have a $5.7 million, $5.8 million deficit.
Correct.
And that deficit, what's driving that deficit? Part of that is we don't have any ESSER funding, so we,
Correct. Yeah.
which we use to backstop the budget.
Mhm.
And how much ESSER funding do we use this year?
We will use 2.7.
We're using 2.7, so you take out the 2.7, and then that leaves 3 million. What's the other additional factors driving the deficit?
We have a structural deficit this year of $850,000. And then the other is just increases on our big line items as far as salaries, benefits, transportation, utilities, are the main drivers.
Mhm.
You know, CPI right now is pretty big.
Yeah, the CPI is pretty big. Can somebody, wish Nicole was here, tell us about the, where we are, salaries relative to other districts in Dane County, and where we are with ability to attract and retain teachers?
So right now, if you look at our starting salaries and our compensation, I would say we are probably just slightly below average when we look at Dane County. And we look at overall compensation with regard to benefits, you know, we might be average. The one challenge is when you hire particularly inexperienced teachers, the salary many times is more important to them than the benefits. Our experienced teachers understand the importance of the benefits a little bit more sometimes. So at times, we lose candidates because another district can offer, you know, a higher wage. I would say that's not the real, you know, driver. I guess personally, my biggest concern is that all the districts are making concerted effort to continue to increase compensation, and the districts that just passed referendums will be increasing compensation significantly in each of those districts, and that we will fall behind because of that. So it's certainly not going to get better for us as far as being more competitive. It's a matter of trying to keep up, so to speak. So that it is a piece. It's not the major issue, but it is an issue with trying to be competitive in hiring teachers.
Oh, do we have any idea, any projections of what that CPI increase is going to be for next year?
We do. So they just posted, I think this week, the next month. So we only have 1 month to go, right? It's the January snapshot.
Yeah.
Right now, I believe is 8.0406. 8.0.
That's the last number I saw.
Yeah.
Great. That's a very large number.
Considering 1 year we had, what, less than a percent, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and just, you know, that represents, that 8% represents how much of the structural deficit?
1.6.
1.6. So it's not like it's, you know, a third of it. It's not like it's, you know, the majority of it.
Yeah.
All right, Susan, you had a question?
Sorry.
I was just gonna say, right before this meeting, I was doing a virtual town hall with the governor on, they had us in breakout groups, so it was education, and there was a lot of emphasis put on special ed reimbursement, which, as we know, he's asking for more than I'm sure we'll get, but that's currently only 30, and I don't know if it'll even work out to be 30% this year. That's
Yeah,
what it was.
it'll be close.
Usually it's a little less, but it's
Right.
close to that. So, and that's, you know, people were pointing out also the need, when we talk about putting funding into schools, there's also a need for funding for training of our paraprofessionals, and as we get more involved in some of the mental health issues, just training for staff, and paying attention to the university. So as I was listening to these people from around the state, you know, and some who live on the border with Minnesota, for example, where their paraprofessionals just across the border of Minnesota are getting $5 an hour more than their district can pay, and they can't even staff full services at this point. They're cutting the time for students, and so there are huge problems around the state, and I think we have a job to do to just continue to try to educate people on that fact. You know, I didn't hear a lot of discussion in the part that I was able to hear before I had to leave to come here about the fiscal cliff that we're all facing. Municipalities are also facing that same thing. I haven't heard any discussion of that coming out of the majority party in the legislature. They're still talking tax cuts. We have a $6.6 billion surplus right now. So, you know, I think we need to keep working on that, but I think the reality is, you know, it is forcing referenda, and I think, you know, we thought we had some more time here, but because of the way the legislature chose to use the federal dollars instead of any state dollars for the last 2 years to give us no state aid. We had to use all that federal money, which was intended to help with learning delays and things caused by the pandemic, and we weren't able to really use it for that much. We were able to hire some extra people for some of the mental health issues we've seen. But I think, you know, we may have to talk about a referendum earlier rather than later because of that. Because these are big dollars, and, you know, we clearly have a lot of needs. We just heard we can't have the high school running without proper heating, and, you know, I mean, we have to keep doing those things, and the cost and everything keep going up, so, anyway. That's my spiel.
Peter, did you have anything else?
Yeah, what are our options?
I don't know a lot of good options.
Well, and I really think that, that this presentation that we have right now tells the story very, very well to the community. And if they look at this, it helps reinforce the position that we say, we're required by state law to educate these kids. That's our job. That's why we're here. And yet we have no funding to do it. 0, 0, 0. I just think that information, in fact, I printed it out and gave it to 2 people that were asking questions, particularly in light of property, you know, house valuations were going up and property taxes were increasing, and I think this tells the story very well.
Is this information public though, or is it still a
Yeah,
secret?
so the document that you have tonight, okay, right now is under admin content. We always want to make sure the board sees it first
Uh-huh.
before we put it out publicly. The few tweaks that Katie and Mark and I made were to make it hopefully more readable, so when we do make it public, so this document after tonight, we will have it publicly
Okay,
available.
so they'll be able to see it.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned it, but nobody
Yeah.
knows what we're talking about.
Yeah, so, but we want to make sure you saw it first, and
Okay.
Peter?
Yeah. I think the numbers are that, that the overall, actually, the levy has gone down, the total levy the last couple of years. And if you look at the line item for the school district, even if your tax, you know, if everybody's property value goes up, then nobody's taxes change. The mill rate will drop, nobody's taxes will change. If you look, and I looked at mine, and there is a drop of what I'm paying in property taxes. And of course, what the legislature have done is taken money that go to schools and put it in property tax relief.
Yeah.
I guess with the idea, giving us the idea that if we want to put it in schools, we can take that back out of our property taxes and put it back in schools through a rather complex roundabout system of raising a referendum to do that. So they take it, they give it back, and we take it again. Go to schools.
You described it perfectly. That's exactly the intention of the legislature, right? Is to provide property tax release, and if local school district wanted to fund their schools, as I would say appropriately, you must go to referendum to do so.
Well,
Just-
oh, go ahead.
I would just say, you know, to follow up on what Peter said, since 1920, the levy has gone down, overall levy has gone down 5.5%.
Mm.
Well, and one of the points someone made in this town hall was that, you know, the whole point of the state funding formula, which has been broken for many years, and which Governor Evers, when he was state superintendent, kept proposing fixes, and of course it never went anywhere with our legislature, but was equitable funding for schools. And what this does, the more we have to rely on referenda to fund our schools, is create very inequitable funding for our schools, and that's happening. We're seeing it happening all over the state right now. Rural areas are really suffering. You know, Milwaukee, they've gotten squeezed, and it's just, it's not what the state statute intended when they talk about providing equitable funding, and that, you know, that was supposed to, the equalized value, the whole formula was supposed to address all that. And the refusal to provide public schools with enough money and rely on referenda is just having the opposite effect, which is very disconcerting. But, you know, we've been fortunate to have a community that supports our schools and has been able to, you know, we'll see. I mean, Not everybody is fortunate to have that. But I just don't see, when I look at this and think about it and look at what the options are, they're just, when you have dollars that are this large and we're falling behind in terms of salaries, we just don't have a lot of good options, I think, short of talking about a referendum sooner than we had hoped.
Eric?
What is, if we were talking about possibly referendum to, as one of the solutions to this, Dan, what is the timeline for that?
So in order to have a question on the April, on the ballot on the April election, the board would have to have a resolution at least 70 days prior to that election date. And so that means, I
January
believe,
20th.
thank you, January 20th.
So we would have to come to a decision as a board before that in order to meet just the timeline of getting it on the ballot for April.
Right, so you could make a decision at your regularly scheduled board meeting on January 11th, or you could call a special meeting at any time, but it has to be by the January 20th.
Okay.
All right, no other questions? Okay,
Okay,
future meeting dates.
so,
Well,
I guess if I could just add, I'm sorry.
You wanna know what we wanna
To
say?
recommend as far as
Sure.
next steps. So what I would recommend is that your next meeting, that Mark and I will prepare a recommendation to bring forth as far as dollar amounts for a potential referendum, and even some, potential wording, for a ballot question, and that you can discuss and, from that point, give feedback about the numbers and so on. And then the following meeting, if you choose to move in that direction, to actually take action. And so that'll lead to our future meeting dates where you can make that determination when you would like to meet in order to do so.
Okay.
All right, future meeting dates.
So I put tentative, actually proposed, when we met there tonight, it was suggested, it was not acted upon, of course, that one option would be to stick to the normal Wednesday meeting nights and have a special meeting that first week in January, with the idea then that you could take action on the January 11th. So that's one option to do that, but just keep in mind it would have to be before January, or by January 20th, which is a Friday.
Well, and I sent Dan and Lorraine
Yeah.
a note. I'm totally unavailable for that date. I will be back for the meeting on the 11th. And I can try and take it virtually, but there's a significant time frame difference, and I
Okay.
can't be positive that some volcano isn't going to be affecting the...
You're in Hawaii or Italy?
Yeah.
Yeah, my older brother lives in Hawaii. He never came home from Vietnam, ever. Stopped in Hawaii.
Just because of the timeline schedule, I really would like to keep the 4th if others are available. And if you are able to come virtually, definitely let us know. Are others available on the 4th?
I'm available.
Yeah, it works for me.
The one thing I will say that, and Susan, I can work with you ahead of time about if you are available to either, whether you'd like to join virtually through a Zoom link or just by phone, we can do either. We actually do have some new technology now that has worked pretty well for individuals to join an in-person meeting, virtually, to be able to.
That'd be great. If you could at least set it up. I can't promise that
Yeah.
it's going to work, but,
Okay, so I'll work with you before you leave. then.
okay.
So-
And the other meetings are listed in board office. Right. I do want to just publicly say, I want to thank Andrew for his time on the board, and he will be sorting this. Okay. Can I have a motion for adjournment?
If we adjourn.
Yeah, where's Andrew when you
Sorry.
need him? He was here 20 minutes ago.
We do have a discussion, I'm sorry.
You got ahead of that now.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it, motion is carried. Meeting is adjourned.
Dan, I can
Thank you
have a question.
very much.